Lord, make me a means of your peace.
Welcome to Catholics Today. I'm Trista Littell with the Catholic Diocese of Lafayette's Pro-Life Apostolate. In January of each year, the Pro-Life Apostolate offers a pro-life oratory contest to area high school students. We are pleased to have young people interested in working hard to promote the dignity of human life. In today's program, we are highlighting 3 participants. In the honorable mention category, please welcome Annie Huckabee.
The snowy egret is a bird that gives birth in triplets. And the first 2 eggs that are born always have enough nutrients for those first 2 to grow into very healthy young birds. However, the last one that is the disposable child. It isn't given enough nutrients to sustain itself. And if there isn't enough food in the surrounding area, the parents will feed that child to its siblings. This is nature's form of infanticide, to say that any child is dispensable. And just as in human infanticide, it's often seen as a case of survival, it is the same in the animal kingdom. Many women who commit infanticide suffer from mental illness or are in poorer conditions or in low socioeconomic standing. And with no support or postpartum depression or psychosis, it is often seen as a mercy kill and that they don't have a choice in the matter. Over 15 to 30% of the mothers who commit infanticide will soon after commit suicide. It is not only the matter of the lives of these children, but it is also a matter of the lives of their parents and our society at large. What does it mean for our world to be able to say that any child is dispensable, no matter how small? To be able to kill a child merely because they're still within the first year of their life, at the most innocent form that they can be in, it is truly devastating. Even the word infant speaks it all, in the fact that infant comes from the Latin for the inability to speak. This shows us that we must be these speechless voices, and it is our duty to make sure that we care for not only the children, but their mothers. We cannot stop at only being pro-life while the child is in the womb, as much of our culture believes that pro-life is only against abortion. We have to support the child through all stages of its life and support their mothers. We cannot allow any child to be left behind and to be proactive in making sure that our futures are secured. In nature, the brown pelican shows us an example of what this self-sacrificial love looks like. If there is not enough food in the surrounding areas, none of the pelican's children will die. The mother pelican will give pieces of its flesh to its child. This is the kind of love that we should show our children if we wish to further our civilization and further our generations. Thank you.
To get to know our contestants better, we have a few questions. Annie Huckabee, who are your parents? Where are you from? And what grade in school do you attend?
I'm Annie Huckabee. My parents are Angela and William Huckabee. I am from Eunice. I am in the 11th grade and I attend the Academy of the Sacred Heart in Grand Coteau.
Annie, how did you find out about the Pro-Life Oratory Contest? And what or who inspired you to participate in it?
The answer to that question is actually the same person, my mom. She was working with the Catholic Daughters and she found out about it and she really inspired me to take a stand on some of the pro-life issues they were talking about.
Annie, how long did you work on this pro-life oratory contest project?
I had been doing research on the issue since around Christmas break and put it all together a couple days ago.
Annie, what was your experience at participating in the pro-life oratory contest here in Lafayette?
My experience was pretty positive, and I'm having a really good time talking with the other contestants, and it was excellent overall.
Annie, what would you say to an underclassman to help get them to participate in next year's pro-life oratory contest?
I would tell them to start doing their research early and to kind of figure out what they're going to say. And since I know that everybody at my school loves to talk, I would just tell them to put that to good use.
Thank you, Annie. Up next is the second place winner, Sam Pete.
Roe v. Wade was passed 45 years ago. Subsequently, America has been going down the wrong road for almost half a century. Now, during this time, our values as Americans have been under assault. The very values enumerated in the Enlightenment and Judeo-Christian values and expressed in the Declaration of Rights, the Bill of Rights, and the Constitution have been under direct or indirect assault by the very concept of abortion. So, the rights brought forward by the documents, the right to life, the inalienable rights, and especially the fact that all men are created equal, are also under attack by abortion. The action of abortion is entirely counterintuitive to our sense of justice as Americans, our sense of responsibility as mothers and fathers, and our sense of rightness as Christians. Now, to understand where we are now, we must first begin where it all started. The pro-choice movement began at the dawn of the 20th century with an activist and first-wave feminist named Margaret Sanger. Now, she was a nurse who worked in hospitals, and she saw women hospitalized daily due to dangerous self-induced abortions. Women didn't have access to contraceptive information like they do now because of a law passed in 1873 called the Comstock Law, which banned women from having contraceptive information due to grounds of obscenity. But she fought back with all her might with rhetoric and seminars to have women understand their bodies. And she succeeded in repealing the law and even published her principles on women having control of their bodies. And the first one goes, children should be conceived in love. The second one, children should be born of the woman's conscious desire. And children should be begotten only under conditions which render possible a heritage of health. Funnily enough, and ironically, this also coincides with the church's teaching of conception. But instead of taking the church's approach, she took the contraceptive approach, the humanistic approach that focused on artificial chemical contraceptives and birth control measures. And at the time, social Darwinism and eugenics was a very large part of American society in the early 20th century. And social Darwinism says that the poor are poor because they are weak, both mentally or morally. And in order to give her movement legitimacy, she allied her movement with the social Darwinists and the eugenicists who also believed that a population could be artificially enhanced through the proliferation of a stronger people. And almost always these stronger people were people of Anglo-Nordic heritage. So these pseudoscientists essentially hijacked her movement to give women more control. And they started targeting the weak members of society, the impoverished minorities. And this corruption still comes to this day. Currently, African Americans have 3 times as many abortions as whites, and Latino and Hispanic communities have 2 times as many. And Planned Parenthood clinics are always somehow conveniently placed in neighborhoods with high minority populations, and almost always they're impoverished. And this injustice that violates the rhetoric of our nation violates the fact that all men are created equal under God. And then the greatest, most inalienable right, the right to life, was violated when the fetus was dehumanized to that level of a parasite. And finally, women's rights had triumphed over the institutions of God and man. But how was the right to life abolished when the family ought to be guarding it? It's simple. Abortion itself destroys the concept of family. The mother is the oldest and most respected and requires the most determination of any job on earth. And because of this, the importance in the family is tantamount to none. And the father is just as old and as important, but they are instinctually different. A mother nurtures the child into a good, healthy person, while the father protects and provides for his loved ones. Ask a mother about this. When she becomes pregnant, she enters a different state of mind, where her whole soul revolves around creating a good environment for her child to live in. And if possible, she will seize any bad habits that might harm the infant child, such as smoking or drinking. They will completely drop it. But women who are told that their babies are just parasites, they lack this instinct. They throw the baby away. They don't have this instinct to protect their baby. And as for fathers who are just as equally to blame, when their wives become pregnant, they begin to create a safe environment for their family instead of just the baby. Even a healthy man of 23 will buy life insurance. He'll move his family to the suburbs away from the city with higher crime rates and murder and all of that. But men who don't listen to this instinct won't take responsibility. So they pay for their wives, their girlfriends, or their significant others for the abortion. So, with the child out of the way, he can continue his life of vanity and emptiness. But abortion has offered a escape route for selfish people of all walks of life who don't want to take responsibility. And abortion itself is a wedge that cleaves the family into unmendable broken pieces for millions of Americans. And Christianity has always played a very vital role in our country as to create a sense of justice. Our justice system itself is based on the laws enumerated in the Ten Commandments and derives its very definition of justice from biblical morality. Self-sacrifice and suffering is the very basis for justice, in fact. And 100% of the time, if one sacrifices himself for another and suffers for another, it is seen as 100% of the time good and just. So God, in order to help us with this act, has imprinted on our hearts the theological virtues of faith, hope, and love. And speaking of self-sacrifice and suffering, childbirth is the greatest example of self-sacrifice and suffering. A woman uses her body and her sustenance to grow and nurture a person inside of her womb. Then she must go through the even more sufferable ordeal of childbirth to guarantee life to her child. This is a beautiful and courageous act. But now self-sacrifice and suffering is considered inconvenient and troublesome. The loss of these important lessons is tied directly to the loss of our sense of justice as Christians, and especially to the loss of the theological virtues in the hearts of Americans. Many people no longer have faith in God. It's not necessary to be a good person, but it certainly helps. But the calamity in the loss of faith isn't in the loss of faith in God. It's the loss of faith in ourselves, the loss of faith in your neighbor. How can one shoulder the burden of nurturing a child if one has no faith, no foundation to stand upon? And hope, too. Many have abandoned hope when they no longer aspire for God. But also, they no longer strive for ambition, nothing higher than oneself. There is no greater act than to bring another life into this world. Certainly a thing higher than oneself. The greatest loss, though, is of the greatest virtue, love. In a society that allows abortion, there is no love for oneself, no love for one's neighbor, and especially no love for God. There is no love being given to the least among us, the unborn child, who is the most innocent and deserving of love. And as long as this evil institution of abortion stands, these virtues, whether Christian or not, will not reside in the hearts of every American. But what are we Christian dissenters to do? Intellectual progressives say that we are imprisoned by Christian morality and are clouded in judgment. They believe that a fetus is a parasite. They believe that to be free is to deny life to an unborn child. But as much as I hate to say it, we are in a minority with a very vocal majority. But this is what the majority say we are. They are misogynist, chauvinist, traditionalist, fascist, scum, who want to see people shackled and unable to execute their free will as people. But this is what I say we are. We are righteous people on a moral crusade to alleviate suffering in the womb, the suffering of the mother and the father, and the suffering of those who believe they have no other choice, and that the right choice is to terminate the life of a fetus, of a child. But the tragedies in this act are everywhere. In the 60 million dead since Roe versus Wade that have died in the name of what? Of free will? In the depression of the mother post-abortion? In the destruction of families? In the decline of our morals as a nation? The truth is, abortion is a chain holding the free people of this land to a lifeless rock with false platitudes and ill-gotten ideals. May God give us the strength to save our people and our children.
Thank you, Sam. Congratulations on winning second place. Who are your parents? Where are you from? And what grade in school do you attend?
My name is Sam Pete. My parents are Kenneth and Cindy Pete, and I'm 17-year-olds and I'm a senior at Opelousas Catholic School in Opelousas.
Sam, how did you find out about the pro-life oratory contest, and what or who inspired you to participate in it?
Well, my speech and debate teacher, she came forward with this to our class, and she just flat out asked, hey, who wants to be in this? And I'm the only person who takes that class seriously, apparently, and I applied. But she's been helping me through the entire process, that and some other teachers in my school and my mom, just helping me flesh out the speech a little bit, and it's been a real pleasure to work on the speech.
Sam, how long did you work on this pro-life oratory project?
Well, I started with the framework, and the framework the thesis only really took 3 hours to come up with, and I made the framework, and I kind of got an idea of how long I wanted the speech to be. But over the weeks, I've been kind of on and off working on it, just fleshing it out, testing out new ideas, and just speaking to empty rooms, just working on my enunciation, my articulation, and just basic speech elements like that, just to make sure that when I got up there, I didn't sound just bad or anything like that.
Sam, what was your experience at participating in the pro-life oratory contest here in Lafayette?
I thought it was really fun. I've never been in an oratory competition like this before, but I'm a naturally competitive person, so I thought it was really fun just seeing other people's ideas and testing my ideas against theirs, which one's stronger. And really, when it comes down to it, they're all right, but it's been a real pleasure just tonight, seeing everybody's ideas and opinions.
Sam, what would you say to an underclassman to help get them to participate in next year's pro-life oratory contest?
Well, I'm gonna be real. The monetary reward is pretty enticing, but it's also a really good idea as a Catholic to be knowledgeable and to be able to speak about issues like these in such a charged and bipartisan and polarized society in America we have these days. And it's a good idea to know your arguments and to be able to speak eloquently and fluidly about just what you believe as a person.
Thank you, Sam. Congratulations on winning second place. Up next, our first place winner, Alexandra Adams.
Did you know that homicide is the third leading cause of death for children aged 5 and under? Did you also know that your first year is when you're most likely to become a homicide victim, just after your teen and adolescent years? These are facts that I have gathered about infanticide, which according to Merriam-Webster Dictionary is the killing of an infant. However, infanticide is so much more than this. The book of Exodus says, "Shed not innocent blood." And by killing children, especially the young, whose blood is the most innocent of all humanity, we are doing just that. Today, I'm going to be discussing infanticide. I'll be presenting a rough history of infanticide, present some numbers that show just how tragic this happening is, and touch for a moment on the tragedy of female infanticide. If we want to work to prevent this tragedy from spreading further and end its existence on this earth altogether, we have to be aware of just how awful it is. Infanticide is usually committed by a parent or step-parent, and most often the mother of the child. Mothers of the children who commit the infanticide come from all socioeconomic situations, age groups, and racial statuses. But a study done in France in 2010 has come to the conclusion that these mothers all usually suffer from low self-esteem, lack of emotional maturity, and fear of abandonment. There are two types of infanticide, active and passive. Active infanticide is when the person who commits it has the intentions to kill the child, and they'll usually do so through head trauma, strangulation, and drowning. Passive infanticide is when the child's death isn't necessarily intended, but things such as starvation, and careless parenting can lead to the child's untimely death. It's not very easy to document infanticide because excuses such as stillbirths and sudden infant death syndrome can be used. Furthermore, some children aren't documented with the government when they are born, and so their deaths aren't noticed. You may be wondering, why would somebody want to kill a child? There are 6 main motives that I will be discussing today. Altruistic infanticide is when a mother kills her child out of love because she believes that the child's best interest is death. Acutely psychotic infanticide is when a mother kills her child because of psychosis-related reasons. Fatal maltreatment infanticide is when the child is neglected and abused to the point of death. Unwanted child filicide is just like it sounds. The mother doesn't want the child and believes he or she is a burden and therefore kills him or her. Spouse revenge infanticide is usually committed by the mother, and the motivation is purely to emotionally harm the partner. Sex-selective infanticide is when the child is killed because of his or her gender. I'll discuss female infanticide more later. There are some other reasons, which include population control, government policy, and beliefs derived from certain cultures. Infanticide itself has stretched over thousands of years. The British Broadcasting Corporation has reported that over the centuries, infanticide has been a top method to prevent poverty, starvation, and other issues associated with overpopulation. The Greeks and Romans usually wouldn't kill their children instantaneously. Instead, they would expose them to the elements with the hopes that they would be rescued by a kind traveler. And whether or not a child was to be exposed was often determined by a father figure in the family, such as a grandfather. Children with birth defects were more often killed than those who didn't have them. And in pagan Europe, exposure was very common as well, for the same exact reasons. During the Middle Ages, various cultures such as the Irish, the Gauls, and the Celts would all sacrifice their children to the gods. Or if they had birth defects, they would kill them because they believed these were derived from supernatural forces. In fact, infanticide was the most committed crime in Western Europe from the Middle Ages all the way to the early 19th century. In the Middle East, the Islamic religion has made infanticide illegal, but before this faith caught hold, infanticide was a very common form of postpartum birth control. Other reasons that children could be killed was sacrifice and fear of fatherly disapproval. In China, infanticide is notoriously popular due to the one-child policy that was established in 1979 and lasted for 35 years. This policy, like it sounds, restricted families to one child, and was granted a major relaxation in 2013. It was later changed into a 2-child policy in 2016, but infanticide still is very popular in this area. According to wikigender.com, infanticide is called mabiki in Japan, which means to pull plants from an overcrowded garden. It was most common in the early 19th and 20th centuries. In India, they would throw children into a river in order to sacrifice them. In 19th century England, it was so popular that both the lay and the medical press were discussing infanticide and how to prevent it. And even America hasn't been able to escape this tragedy. In fact, the United States is one of the top-ranking nations when it comes to infanticide. The English colonists brought it over and found that their Native American counterparts also participated. And as time passed, children were still extremely prone to the possibility of death. In antebellum, Virginia, the mortality rate of children under the year of 1 age was 16 to 20%. And out of the 11,000 murders that were committed in the United States in 1966, 4.5% of those were children killed by their parents. Even though these numbers seem small, the fact that they're anything greater than 0 is very devastating. Obviously, talking about the history isn't enough, so I've gathered some more numbers to prove just how tragic this is. According to encyclopedia.com, throughout history, 10 to 15% of all infants have been killed by their parents. And it doesn't just stop there. In the United States in 1983, over 600 children were reported killed by their parents, and from a 5-year period from 1982 to 1987, approximately 1.1% of all homicides in the United States was children. According to childtrends.org, 7 out of every 100,000 babies was killed due to infanticide just in 2016. Earlier I mentioned sex-selective infanticide. Male babies are killed more often in the United States, but pretty much everywhere else in the world, female babies are more often killed. This is because male babies are often viewed more desirable, since they usually grow up and go and make the money, while women stay at home and take care of the house. Also, some families in poverty didn't want to have to buy expensive wedding dowries for their daughters when they got married. The one-child policy also contributed to this. In the UN World Report on Violence Against Children, conducted among 1,000 women in India, determined that infanticide was the cause of the death of 41% of newborn girls. This is a tragedy and has gone just beyond being an issue. Infanticide is one of the most heinous crimes that can be committed from a Catholic standpoint. The fifth commandment says, "Thou shalt not kill," but by killing children, we are killing the most innocent of all human beings. Pope Francis said, "Life, once conceived, must be protected with the utmost care." And by failing to protect that gift, we are failing the children themselves. I hope that this short time has been enough to convince you that infanticide has gone past the point of just being an issue, and that we must stop at nothing to end it in this world. I thank you for your time and your ears, and I hope that you all have a great year.
Thank you, Alexandra, and congratulations on winning first place. Who are your parents? Where are you from? And what grade and school do you attend?
My name is Alexandra Adams. My parents are Sandra and Gary Adams. I'm from Franklin, Louisiana, and I am a senior at Hanson Memorial High School.
Alexandra, how did you find out about the pro-life oratory contest? And what or who inspired you to participate in it?
I was asked by my English teacher to participate, but my love for the pro-life issue and the fact that it is so close to heart and to home and my Catholic faith inspired me to participate in this.
Alexandra, how long did you work on this pro-life oratory project?
I worked for a week or so at least, and it took me a little while to do the research and write the speech itself and get it edited and looked at by a few peers, and then practicing took another week at least.
Alexandra, what was your experience at participating in the pro-life oratory contest here in Lafayette?
It was a very nerve-wracking but exhilarating experience, and definitely an experience I would want to do again.
Alexandra, what would you say to an underclassman to help get them to participate in next year's pro-life oratory contest?
I would tell them that this contest is a chance for them to express their faith and their belief in the pro-life movement, and a chance for them to just show the world that our movement isn't just older people, it is a young generation of people as well.
Thank you, Alexandra, and congratulations on winning first place. Good luck at representing Acadiana in the Louisiana State Pro-Life Oratory Contest. And we pray that you win that challenge and go on to the National Pro-Life Oratory Contest later on in the year. Well, that's Catholics Today for this week. We want to thank everyone who participated in this year's contest. Please encourage high school age students in your area to enter next year's Pro-Life Oratory Contest. Thank you for joining us on Catholics Today.